11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Something happened in the port city of Fujairah that wasn't supposed to happen. Not a cyber attack, not a smuggling incident, not another Houthi claim that would fade by morning. Fire. Satellite imaging from Planet Labs captured the thermal anomaly at 11:47 p.m. local time. The signature was concentrated, intense, and located exactly where the UAE stores its refined petroleum products before loading them onto tankers bound for the Strait of Hormuz. For 47 minutes, emergency services in Fujairah tried to contain it. They've drilled for oil fires. They've prepared for tanker explosions. They've trained for everything except what actually happened. Because when the first responder reports came in at 12:34 a.m., they described something their protocols didn't have a category for. Not a pipeline rupture. Not a storage tank overpressure. Not an electrical fault in one of the refinery's aging systems. The fire started at the exact center of the facility's most vulnerable section. The section that satellite imagery from 3 days earlier showed was protected by 4 CRAM systems. The section that UAE military planners had personally assured their American counterparts was outside practical drone range, the section that was on fire. And for the next 6 hours, as the smoke rose over Fujairah and tanker traffic slowed to a halt, nobody in Abu Dhabi would say how it started. But the silence wasn't confusion. The silence was calculation. The UAE's official statement, released 14 hours later, said, "A technical malfunction in one of the refinery's processing units caused a localized fire that was quickly contained. No injuries, no disruption to operations." That sentence started alarm bells for me. Not because I think the UAE is lying exactly, but because of what they chose to describe as localized and quickly contained. A $3.2 billion refinery facility, 200,000 barrels per day of processing capacity. 4 CRAM defense systems installed specifically because American intelligence briefings had warned that Iranian drones could reach Fujairah. And it just malfunctioned. Let me tell you what satellite imagery actually shows from that night, because almost nobody covering this story has bothered to explain it properly. The thermal signature didn't spread from a single point like a equipment failure would. Thermal spread from a malfunction moves outward in a gradient. Heat decreases as distance from the failure point increases. The Fujairah thermal signature didn't do that. Here's what almost nobody covering this has bothered to explain. The fire at Fujairah moved in a straight line, not a circle, a line. Satellite data from 3 independent sources, Planet Labs, Sentinel-2, and a commercial operator I'm not authorized to name, all show the same pattern. The fire started at the southern end of Tank 7. It traveled north-northeast for approximately 47 meters. Then it stopped. That is not how a technical malfunction burns. A pressure rupture explodes outward. An electrical fault ignites at the source and spreads in all directions. A human error, a dropped torch, a spilled solvent, creates an irregular pattern based on fuel distribution. A straight line is something else entirely. A straight line is what happens when a drone carrying a shaped charge, specifically an Iranian-designed Qasef-2K with a modified warhead, impacts a storage tank at a 22-degree angle. The shaped charge directs the explosion forward. The burning fuel follows the path of least resistance, and the result is a fire that travels in exactly the direction the drone was flying. I've been sitting with those satellite images for 4 days. The UAE has not released thermal footage. They have not released security camera footage. They have not released the CRAM radar logs from the 4 systems that were supposedly protecting that facility. What they have released is a 47-second statement that used the words technical malfunction 3 times. The same phrase Israel used when their AWACS went into the Mediterranean. The same phrase the U.S. used when the USS Mason reported unexplained proximity events in the same waters. The same phrase that has become, in the last 18 months, the official language for, we know exactly what happened, but admitting it would mean acknowledging a war we are not ready to fight. Here's what I keep coming back to. The thing that made me spend the last 4 days rebuilding this from satellite imagery, shipping data, Iranian drone inventory reports, and the notable gaps between the UAE's public statements and their private diplomatic communications. The question isn't whether Iran set that refinery on fire. The question is why the UAE is pretending they didn't. 2 different questions. 2 different answers. Answer 1 is straightforward. The drone was almost certainly an Iranian Qasef-2K, range 150 kilometers, warhead 30 kilograms of high explosive with a shaped charge liner optimized for penetrating storage tanks, guidance inertial with terminal electro-optical, which means it doesn't need GPS and can't be jammed. Cost to Iran, approximately $18,000. The damage to Fujairah, estimated $47 million in destroyed refined products, structural damage to Tank 7 and adjacent infrastructure, plus 4 days of reduced processing capacity at a facility that handles 40% of the UAE's domestic fuel production. Iran spent $18,000 to inflict $47 million in direct damage. That ratio is 1 to 2,600. But answer 2 has no price tag, and that's why it's more important. The UAE has spent the last decade building an economy based on two things: oil exports through the Strait of Hormuz and the reputation that the Emirates are a safe place to do business. A refinery fire in Fujairah threatens both. But acknowledging that an Iranian drone, not a Houthi proxy, not an accident, but an Iranian military drone, struck UAE soil threatens something even more fundamental: the UAE's operational assumption that they can remain outside the Iran-Israel war. For roughly 8 years, UAE policy has been de-escalation with Iran, diplomatic engagement, economic cooperation, public statements about shared interests, private assurances that Emirati territory would not be used for strikes against Iranian interests. That policy just went into the Mediterranean with the same phrase Israel used: technical malfunction. Because the alternative, publicly acknowledging that Iran has drawn a line across the Gulf that now includes Fujairah, would force the UAE into a choice they have spent years avoiding. Either accept Iranian strikes on their territory as a new normal, or respond militarily and enter a war they have no interest in fighting. That assumption is what burned at Fujairah. Not just Tank 7. Okay, the number. Iran spent approximately $18,000 to destroy $47 million of UAE infrastructure, disrupt 40% of their domestic refining capacity for 4 days, and force a public statement that everyone in the region knows is false. I'm going to say that again because the first time it sounds like a statistic. $18,000 in exchange for $47 million in direct damage, plus 4 days of regional uncertainty, plus the quiet collapse of the UAE's policy of non-involvement. That ratio is 1 to 2,600. Iran spent $1 for every $2,600 of damage inflicted. But here's the thing. Everyone is asking, how bad is this for the UAE? The real question is, what does the UAE do now with the other 23 storage tanks at Fujairah, the 14 tankers currently waiting to load, and the 4 CRAM systems that didn't detect the drone that just proved they're useless? The UAE doesn't have a good move here. I mean that precisely. Option 1. Admit the drone strike happened, demand accountability from Iran, risk an escalation that draws the UAE into a war with its largest trading partner in the region. Option 2. Maintain the fiction of a technical malfunction, install more defense systems, change patrol patterns, and accept that Iranian drones can now strike Emirati territory at will, as long as everyone agrees not to say so publicly. Neither option restores what existed before Tuesday night. Let me show you why this is a trap, not just a setback. The UAE's military is capable. Their Air Force flies F-16s and Mirage 2000s. Their air defense includes Patriot batteries and THAAD. They spend approximately $25 billion annually on defense, which puts them in the top 20 military budgets globally. None of that matters at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, when an $18,000 drone approaches at 120 kilometers per hour from an azimuth that the CRAM radar was not programmed to prioritize. The 4 CRAM systems at Fujairah were configured to detect rockets and mortars, incoming trajectories with high launch angles and predictable ballistic arcs. The Qasef-2K is not a rocket. It's a delta-wing drone that flies low and slow. It looks like a bird on radar until it's too late. And if you reprogram your CRAM to filter out birds, you get false positives every time a seagull crosses the perimeter. The UAE faces the same trap Israel faces with their remaining AWACS aircraft. Iran doesn't need to hit every tank. They needed to prove once that they could hit one. Because now every tanker captain loading at Fujairah is asking questions their insurance adjusters can't answer. Every refinery operator is recalculating risk premiums. Every diplomat in Abu Dhabi is being asked by their foreign ministers, can you protect our assets, or can't you? And the answer the UAE cannot say out loud is, we don't know. Iran spent $18,000 to turn Fujairah from a reliable partner into a question mark, from a safe bet into a risk, from a non-combatant into a target. That is not a military victory. That is a psychological one. And psychological victories don't show up on satellite imagery. But they do show up in the insurance rates, in the shipping delays, in the quiet conversations where Emirati officials use the phrase technical malfunction 3 times in 47 seconds. Here's what makes this harder to talk about than it should be. The UAE cannot publicly acknowledge the full implication without admitting that their defense systems failed. That admission invites questions about every other critical facility. Those questions invite insurance rate hikes. Rate hikes invite shipping diversions. Diversions invite economic pressure that the UAE's diversification strategy was specifically designed to avoid. The silence is not a cover-up. The silence is a choice between bad options. Whether there's anything useful to do with that time is the question that keeps this from being a simple story about a refinery fire that started at 11:47 p.m. and ended 6 hours later. Because the fire is out. Tank 7 will be repaired. Insurance will pay. Operations will resume. But the operational assumption that the UAE was outside Iran's practical strike range? That is not being repaired. That is not being insured. That is not resuming. It's gone. And it's not coming back. So here's my question for you, and I want to read your answers in the comments. Does the UAE continue to pretend this was a technical malfunction, or do they quietly request American or Israeli air defense systems that would acknowledge publicly what everyone already knows privately? I'll be reading the comments. I'll pin the best analysis, and I'll do a follow-up when, not if, the next drone crosses the Gulf. This is war conflict. We watch so you don't have to close your eyes.